One of the basic principles of public health is that you cannot look only at one disease. You have to look at public health very broadly. And the strategy we have used for COVID-19 has not been good for COVID-19, but it's also generated enormous collateral damage on other public health.
Of putting on the table an alternative strategy for dealing with the current crisis, which protects the vulnerable, but at the same time allows us to minimize the damage done, particularly to the young and the disadvantaged sectors of our population. And that strategy essentially consists of shielding the vulnerable or investing quite seriously in finding ways to protect the vulnerable. We think we can do that while allowing those who are not vulnerable to this disease to go out there and get infected and build up what we call and will continue to call herd immunity, which is a level of immunity in the population that reduces the risk for everybody, which of course is consequential, particularly for those who are vulnerable.
Are you advocating a herd immunity strategy?
So herd immunity is not a strategy. Herd immunity is a fact about most infectious diseases, the course that they spread through the population. Even if we were to have an effective vaccine, we would be relying on herd immunity as the endpoint of this infectious disease epidemic. So it's less of a strategy than a recognition of a biological fact. Our aim is not to say we should just do nothing. In fact, that's, I think, the misconception that people have when they hear the words herd immunity strategy. In fact, it's quite the opposite. As both Dr. Kulldorff and Dr. Gupta have emphasized, our strategy involves protecting the vulnerable. Now, how do we know about that? We've learned a lot about this disease in the 8 months that we've had to live with it. In particular, we've learned what groups are most vulnerable should they become infected for mortality and other severe bad outcomes. We've also learned about groups that are relatively well protected, even should they become infected. Children, for instance, in the United States, more children have died this year from the seasonal flu than have died from COVID-19. Children, and thank God, are relatively protected from COVID-19 infection should they become infected than an older adult, 65 or 70 or higher, who really are in a vulnerable position. Our strategy takes advantage of that that knowledge we've gained about this and proposes concrete ways of addressing the needs of the vulnerable so that they don't become infected, so they don't die from the disease, while at the same time, the people who are suffering from the collateral damage of the lockdown, closed schools, closed businesses, closed universities, depression, suicidal ideation, all that enormous collateral damage when they face very little risk from death from the disease, that has to end. So the premise is not to do something reckless. The premise is to take account, as Dr. Kulldorff said, of all of public health, all of the harms we care. This is a science-based approach, and it's aimed at minimizing the harm to the population at large. And I think that's the message we want to send. It's something that we could get behind. Everyone can get behind because it is the way to reduce the harm to the vulnerable and reduce the harm to the younger population who are less vulnerable.
While everybody can get infected, and many will get infected, the risk of mortality, the risk of death, is very, very different across the ages. And it's not like it's twice as high risk. It's not that it's 5 times high risk. It's not that it's 10 times. It's not that it's 100 times. The difference risk between the oldest and the youngest is more than 1,000-fold in terms of mortality.
Response to this has been very myopic, I suppose. I mean, or blinkered. We've been looking down a single axis on this. And that's been my problem right from the outset, is that we surely right from the outset should have started thinking about all the damage that could be done and would be done if we simply went about with following this single goal of getting rid of or suppressing this virus.